Let me see if I can. We'll try. We will try. Actually, you can kind of see it. I don't know if you can, but that little bit of gray, that's actually the part that gets the most heat. And so that is a really, really well-designed heat soak tile that's going to absorb the majority of the heat, because the tips of the wings and the very front of the nose of the shuttle are going to be the spots that get the most heat from re-entry. Now, in total, our shuttle, which you can see a very nice shot of right here, takes over 24,000 tiles. Think about that. Imagine how long it would take to inspect every single one of these tiles. And that had to be done after every successful flight up to the station. And to give you an idea of how many, there were over 130 flights, I believe, that were up to the International Space Station and also helped construct it. Now we're going to go ahead and actually go inside now. Oops, got a wheel that keeps trying to get caught. We're going to be going into what's called the mid-deck now. So the first thing I want to show you that's really cool. So where we are right now, if we were in space, we'd have to be wearing our spacesuits right now, because we are actually in the docking bay. This is actually the shuttle docking area. So if we were actually trying to deploy something into low Earth orbit, such as some of the modules for the International Space Station, which again, the shuttle actually sent up most of the pieces that made the International Space Station, over 35 missions to construct it with just our shuttlecraft. It would also be used to deploy satellites. In fact, the one that you're seeing right here, that is an actual satellite casing from STS-49. Now, if you're wondering, what's STS? That just stands for Space Transport System. And that's what you'll often hear shuttle missions called. So like if you see patches and they say things like STS-49 or STS-30, that just means Space Transport System Mission 49. So this was actually one of the largest EVAs or spacewalks we'd ever done, was trying to fix this specific satellite that struggled with deployment. So again, it's amazing because where you're standing right here would be out in space. Your astronauts would have to be in spacesuits. So I'm going to kind of come over this way a little bit. You may notice above me that the ceiling looks a little bright. And that's because it's basically covered in a really thick coating that's designed to reflect sunlight. So that way, they wouldn't get a lot of heat damage inside here. So it's pretty cool to think about. This would actually be exposed to the environment of space. So all that radiation, being in a vacuum and all that good stuff. So again, over here, you can see a couple other really amazing artifacts. These little things right here were actually designed to help deploy different payloads. So they had to be kind of quickly made when we were trying to deploy certain things. But again, it was an improvised attachment, which is pretty cool. Now, one of the things that we would use, payload is cargo, I meant to say that, thank you. Let me turn this a little bit. It's kind of hard to see this, but let me bend this back. Here we go. Can y'all see that where it says Canada? That is actually the Canada arm. Now, the Canada arm's job was to help deploy all of those payloads I mentioned. So things like the International Space Station components or satellites or things like that. And it's what's called an end effector. And that's just basically a fancy name for saying a robotic gripper. So something that's designed to manipulate or move something. So a robotic gripper or end effector, if you want to use the NASA term. So now we're going to go ahead and move into the middeck. And I'm going to go ahead and pick this up because the floor here is a little bumpy and we got to take a step. Okay, here we go. Into the middeck. Now, you're going to notice that these are very tight quarters. We are actually now inside the middeck. In fact, let me kind of bend this down a little bit to show you something. If you see the floor down there, you see that yellow line? Past that yellow line is going to be exposed to space. So that is actually, past that, all exposed to vacuum. Meaning, unless you're wearing a spacesuit, you can't go out there. Now, the area we're in right now is where astronauts would actually stay once they were up in low Earth orbit or in that microgravity environment. Now, they would have to spend sometimes upwards of 2 weeks in an area like this. Now, most shuttle crews would consist or have about 7 astronauts. So look at how small this little area is. I'm going to kind of try and give you a full view of this. It's kind of hard to see, but you can get an idea of just how tight it is. Now, when this shuttle takes off, we're going to be going up to the flight deck in a second so you can see where it's controlled from. But when it would take off, you would have 4 astronauts that would be upstairs in the flight deck. You'd have 3 that would be down here in what's, of course, called the mid-deck. So I'm going to point a couple of things out here in the mid-deck that are really cool. What's actually behind me right here are basically how they slept. Now, the great thing about space is that you can sleep in any direction. Upside down, on the floor, on the wall, and it all feels the same. There's no way to really tell up and down. So you could sleep on the ceiling, and it would feel the same as laying on your bed like you are probably doing right now. Now, the thing behind me, with the spacesuit in it, this is what's called an airlock. So what we're in here would be in the same conditions that the Earth would be like. So 1 atmosphere of pressure and the same kind of temperatures that we would deal with on Earth. So you'd basically get in the airlock here, get on your spacesuit, which would weigh over 300 pounds, and once you're suited up, which could take a good while, you would basically exit the airlock, and you'd be out in space, in microgravity, doing a spacewalk, which is really cool when you think about it. So it can take a long time to actually get suited up, sometimes upwards of an hour. Still takes a long time to this day. Now, this door-looking thing that you see right over here, that is actually the hatch. So that was how they would enter and exit the shuttle, or as NASA likes to say, ingress and egress. Ingress meaning enter, egress meaning exit, if you want to use the cool NASA-sounding term. Now, you got to remember, this would be standing upright. So you'd have the 2 solid boosters on the side, the white boosters, and you'd have the orange liquid-fueled external tank in the middle. And so this would be standing up, and you'd use basically like this arm that would connect to the hatch. And astronauts would climb into the hatch wearing this over here, which we actually call the pumpkin suit. I'm sure you can probably guess why we call it the pumpkin suit. All my cadets out there that probably love Halloween, it definitely has that look to it. It's got that really bright orange pumpkin color. And so we would actually wear these when we were going up into space and we were coming back down into space. So they're called the launch or the landing and entry suits, or the pumpkin suits is what we love to call them. Now, the other things I want to point out over here, these are the astronauts' lockers. So before the International Space Station was all built, which it finished being, the majority of it finished in the early 2000s. It's actually been it's had 1 person on it at least since the 2000s. So it's been completely inhabited for over 20 years now. But prior to that, astronauts would actually do a lot of their science experiments up in space in this area right here by the lockers. So each astronaut would have their own locker where they could put their stuff. So see right here, our astronauts got a business shirt, they've got a CD because they like to listen to music, and they might bring other things too. So astronauts, will not only just do science, but they'll love to do things in their free time, like watch TV, read, and do other fun stuff like that. Now this little machine over here is actually how our astronauts would hydrate their food. So when they would come up here, they would have these pre-packaged little packets of food that would tell them how much water to add. So they would add a certain amount of water, which a lot of that water used to be water once before. We'll talk more about that here in a second. It's pretty cool. So they would basically come here, add in some water, and poof, instant space food. And we actually have one very similar to this on board the International Space Station that is actually going to be a lot more complex. And so it's actually very good at breaking down the water, or what used to be water, what we call wastewater, and making it back into fresh, drinkable water. so that astronauts can use it for all their food and drink. Now over here, I'm going to kind of stand behind you this time because it's really crowded back here. This is the space toilet. I'm going to kind of bend it down a little bit. You can kind of see a little better, maybe. There you go. There you can see it. The space toilet right there. Now, as weird as this sounds, astronauts would actually have to practice how to use this. It's not easy staying on target in space, especially with a lack of gravity, what's called microgravity. So they would actually have to practice in a building across the street from me at Johnson Space Center how to actually use the bathroom in space. Now, solid waste is actually going to be brought back to Earth during the shuttle program. Nowadays, it's sometimes brought back to Earth, sometimes it's actually intentionally burnt up in the atmosphere, which that means sometimes if you ever see a meteor shower, you might be seeing something that, well, you get the idea. And so with liquid waste, again, that would be used to be made back into water. You'd filter it out, it'd be heavily cleaned, and you'd be able to drink it again, which is pretty cool. Now, the last thing that I'm going to mention, I had one more thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, so just as a reminder, think about how small this is. You saw, it's very tiny. You would have sometimes upwards of 7 astronauts in this little area. And so again, this is where they would suit up. So look at how much of space this takes up. Everything beyond that yellow line that I showed you earlier is in space. So if you don't have your spacesuit, you're not going to be having too great of a day. All right? So now I'm going to go ahead and start making my way upstairs to the flight deck. So if y'all want to go ahead and take some questions real quick while I am transiting, to use the science term.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Everyone, let's open up the chat room. Let's quickly do some Q&A and fun questions. You guys ready? All right. So go ahead and use the group chat or shout out your answers. Unmute your microphones and shout out the answers if you know it. Ready? Here's question 1. What did the space shuttles help build in space? Remember we talked about it really early on. The acronym is 3 letters, and it's still orbiting Earth today. What did the space shuttles help to build in space? Anyone? Want to take a guess? Ellie? Dulcie? Any guesses? I see Ellie's maybe typing. ISS, what does ISS stand for? Anyone? Almost there. Is Ellie still typing? All right, so the International Space Station, right? The huge, the largest structure we have right now in the sky. The International Space Station actually took approximately 10 years to build. And it took over 30 space shuttle missions to assemble it. So this is the result of unprecedented scientific and engineering collaboration amongst international countries. It was built by 5 different space agencies, and it represents 15 countries, if I'm right, Chris. 15 countries on International Space Station. Okay, so it really emphasizes the importance of teamwork. Next, we have at Johnson Space Center, where do astronauts train to take spacewalks? Again, 3 letters. Here's a hint. Starts with N. The last initial is L. Anyone? It looks like a pool, but it's a lab. I gave the last word away. Anyone? NBL. I see Ellie's typing. No, just thinking. Bonnie, Dulcie, Caden, any guesses? You're welcome to unmute your mic and just shout it out. Neutral, and the second word means to float. Neutral. Oh, Thomas? Any guesses? All right, astronauts train at the Johnson Space Center in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. Okay, so as you were doing all week, right, you were building different things for your Mars habitat. You're refining your designs by optimizing it. You're doing trial and error, and you're practicing what's the best case scenario, right? So these are the astronauts doing the same thing. They have to get themselves prepared so that in the face of challenges that they meet up in space, they know how to react, right? So it takes practice, practice, and practice. All right, last one before we cut back to Chris. How many space shuttle missions successfully flew into space? Keyword being successful. 3 digits, we covered this really quickly in our PowerPoint. Or you can count the number of patches here, which will take you a while, but I think these aren't the complete set. Starts with 100. What's the other 2 digits? Anyone? Take a guess. Shout it out. Type in the chat room. Parents, you're welcome to type in the chat room as well. Kaden, Thomas, you with us? How many missions? 125, Ellie. Very, very close. Very close. Another guess? One more? One more? 127, Kaden. Very, very close. 130, you're getting closer. Really, really hot. Really, really hot. Keep going, keep going. 135, yes, we hit it. Nice, Dulcie and Ellie. Thank you. 135 is correct. And see, this emphasized again, trial and error. We do everything, even though you might encounter failures in life, whether it's in school, whether it's in your work. For parents, don't be disheartened by it. Definitely take it with a grain of salt. Definitely take and welcome criticism. That way you can improve, right? So failure is the path to success. Always remember that. I see Chris is already there. Let's quickly cut back to Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hey there, Ted. All right. So we are now back up here at the flight deck. So you can actually see the windows of our Independence shuttle right here. We're going to go ahead and make our way inside. So again, one thing to think about again is the fact that all of this has those tiles I was mentioning earlier, those tiles that were designed to prevent the heat from re-entry, from coming back in through Earth's atmosphere, from hurting our astronauts. Now, another thing that I want you to notice, there's 2 seats right here. These 2 seats are going to be in the area we're about to go inside. It's kind of hard to see them. You can kind of see them right there. I'm kind of in shadow, but they're right over here. You can also get a better image of the Canada arm right here. Really good. So again, that's the end effector, or the robotic arm I was mentioning. That's used to basically help move things around. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how small the flight deck is. You ready? NASA's thing over the years is you have to be very comfortable with being in close quarters. All right, so let's show you. It's pretty small. Okay, so you can kind of see down here, that's actually where the airlock would be. The little area back here that I'm in, that's it. That is it. And there would be 4 astronauts up here. So you'd have what's called the commander, who would be the one actually flying the shuttle. You'd have the pilot, which is funny. He's actually the co-pilot, but NASA uses the term pilot, who would basically be second in command. And then you'd have what are called 2 mission specialists. Now, their job would basically be to monitor some of the other controls up here with the commander and pilot. So the commander would basically be in charge of all the big stuff, like actually flying it. And then the pilot, who's the co-pilot by our definitions, would be kind of the backup, like helping out with everything. I want you to notice something. Look at all those buttons. I don't know if you can see, there are a lot of buttons, a whole lot. Every one of those buttons, there are over 2,000 buttons and levers. They would have to memorize all of them. They have to know exactly what they would all be used for so that they could control it and make sure that they were able to fly it successfully. Now, when we get to the Falcon, which we'll be heading down to in just a moment, you're going to get to see just how different it's going to be. The Falcon, the actual Crew Dragon capsule, doesn't really have any buttons and knobs. It's pretty much a couple of tablets, very similar to how the Teslas look, where it's like a tablet that kind of controls all the onboard computing. So we don't have a Crew Dragon capsule to show you, but I can tell you that that's what it would basically look like. It would hold 7 astronauts, similar to the shuttle, and it would be a little bit bigger than the Apollo capsules, which again were still very cramped, but now they're a little more roomy because they don't have to hold as many buttons as we did back in the early 80s into the 2000s. So again, the shuttle program lasted about 30 years, from 1981 to 2011. Like Commander Ted was saying, it flew over 135 missions. Unfortunately, we did have 2 missions that ended in tragedy, which were the Challenger and Columbia. Now, Challenger was the one that actually had problems when it was taking off, and this was actually because we flew when the weather was too cold. So we learned from that mission that we have to be very careful when we launch, that the weather and conditions have to be perfect at the launch site and all the way at all the different secondary landing sites, because there's a lot of areas where astronauts might land if there's a problem. Columbia, what actually happened is they had a heat tile that got damaged when it was taking off that they didn't recognize. And as it was coming back through, since there was a crack in it, heat actually went up into the tile and actually caused a chain reaction. Now, the good thing is even though, unfortunately, we lost those astronauts' lives, NASA learned a whole lot from both of those missions. So nowadays, whenever we launch a shuttlecraft, or any, not shuttles anymore, but any kind of spacecraft, we all make sure the conditions are perfect, that there aren't any weather problems or environmental concerns at all. And because of Columbia, we make sure that we always are monitoring the area by the capsules to make sure there isn't any damage from takeoff. So there's cameras all over the craft that we're viewing. And if you watch later shuttle missions, you can see that all over the place, where there's cameras looking down the belly of the shuttle, as well as along the wings and everywhere, to make sure there's no damage. So again, we are in the flight deck, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the other buttons over here. You can kind of see them, just to give you an idea. So again, memorizing all of these buttons and controls, all over 2,000 of them. I don't think I could do it. It would take a really special kind of NASA scientist to do it, and I'm sure a lot of my scientists that could be future astronauts are in my audience. So we're going to go ahead and start making our way over to the Falcon, and we're actually going to get to see the belly of the shuttle as well. So you can see all the heat tiles below it. And it looks really amazing when you get to see all of them there. And again, you can think about what I said earlier about how all of them have to be inspected, all 2,400 of them. It really takes a lot of work. All right, so we're going to go ahead and head on down to the ground floor. We're in our elevator right now.
All right, let me have the floor, Chris. Let's do another couple of quick questions while we travel downstairs. So what was the name of the telescope the space shuttles took into space? You remember at the very beginning? That's a very cute animal. Is it an animal? Ellie? Yep, so what is the name of the telescope that the space shuttle took into space? Starts with the H, sounds like a bubble. Anyone? Hayden? Guesses? It took Hubble. Very good. Very good. Yes, it's the Hubble telescope. So again, we took millions of photos of faraway galaxies, and it goes to show that this is a culmination of all the scientific discoveries, right? If we want to venture into further outer space, we really need to know what's out there, familiarize ourselves to make sure that we're going to be safe when we travel all that distance. I see Chris has already gotten to the ground floor. That was really quick. Let's come back to Chris.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, the trip down's nice and easy with an elevator. So you can actually see some of the numbers up there above me. So that's the wing. I'm by the left wing of the shuttle right now. And a cool thing up here, it's really hard to see. I'm going to see if I can get it in view. It's really hard, but we'll try. You can kind of see it. Up there at the top, don't know if you can see those portraits. That actually shows all the different missions that this plane actually sent up. So this plane, the one that the shuttle is sitting on, actually sent up multiple shuttle missions. A lot of the ones that actually traveled between launch sites were sent by this plane. And I'd love to talk more about it, but I actually want to make sure I got plenty of time to talk about the Falcon 9. And you can actually see really good the tiles right there. So look at how many of them there are. And no two of them are alike. They all fit together like a really complicated puzzle piece or puzzle set. So a lot of work goes into it. One of the things I want to point out on the plane, though, that kind of relates to the shuttle, you might notice those two bars sticking out right there. That big bar, that was actually installed on the plane to help stabilize it, to keep the plane level. So it took a lot of engineering to basically make the plane capable of carrying the shuttle between different launch sites. So between the landing site and the launch site. Because before that, the way we thought we were going to transport the plane from place to place was using the Panama Canal in Mexico and having to take it by boat, which was expected to take days. Now, when we did it, it only took hours. So it was a whole lot quicker to boat. So we're now getting really close to the Falcon 9. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and turn it so you can see it. You can see the 9 Merlin engines. So Falcon 9, the name Falcon is actually from Star Wars. So if I have any Star Wars fans out there that love the Millennium Falcon, I know I do, the Millennium Falcon is named after because Elon Musk is a massive Star Wars fan. And so he named his rocket after the Millennium Falcon, and the 9 is named after the number of engines. So just like how the Saturn V, which the building of is actually right across the street from me, the Saturn V has 5 engines. Falcon 9 has 9 engines, which is why it's called the Falcon 9. Now, this specific Falcon 9 actually flew 2 missions up to the International Space Station, 2 supply missions. And so one was in June of 2017. The other one was in December of 2017. So a couple of years back. Now, you may notice those little white caps. Those are basically just so no animals or dust gets inside our rocket, so it stays nice and clean. But when this thing was taking off, it would use the same kind of rocket fuel that the Saturn V used across the street. A mix of what's called RP1, which was basically kerosene, or very similar to like what we use in gas grills, and oxygen. So the same reaction that has been used for a lot of rockets is used by the Falcon. Now we're going to go ahead and come over this way, curve around this direction. Now those little things that you see that look like triangles, those are actually where the legs would come out. So again, this is the first stage of the Falcon 9. This is actually the part of the rocket that would be reusable. So again, I said it was used for 2 flights. So one of them went up, it went up part of the way, came down, landed on the drone ship, and then it was cleaned off, made flight ready again, and did the same thing. Went up as far as it could go, came back down, and used these legs to help it land safely on the drone ship in the middle of the ocean. And so that's the really cool thing about these rockets is that they're reusable. The first stage you can use a couple of times as long as you keep them clean. Now you may notice all of the soot, what looks like carbon scoring. When we actually got the Falcon, there was a lot of talk of, hey, maybe we should clean it. But we're like, no, why would you clean it? It's a mark of what it's been through. So again, that marking that you can see, that's all from re-entry, from coming back in through Earth's atmosphere and it dealing with the really high temperatures of re-entry. And of course, you can see it says SpaceX right there next to it. Now again, this right here is going to be just the first stage. This would go up a couple miles up, and then after a while, it would basically disconnect from the second stage, and the second stage would continue on its way up to the International Space Station. And after a while, it would be just the capsule that would be making its way up to the International Space Station. Now, just like how we use the term STS to refer to the shuttle or the space transport system, we use the term CRS, to refer to SpaceX missions. So, for example, CRS-23 is the upcoming SpaceX delivery mission within a couple of weeks. Now, right over here, these little things, which kind of look like waffle irons, I guess. I don't really know how else to describe them. They kind of look like waffle irons. Those are actually fins. So when this thing was coming back through the atmosphere, it would basically use them to kind of help guide itself down. So it would help guide itself back down to land on those drone ships that I mentioned earlier. Now, the other thing I want you to notice, this whole rocket, by the way, when it is attached to the second stage, would be roughly 220 feet in length, or about 70 meters. So really tall. Not quite as tall as the Saturn. That was about 120 meters, but still quite tall, considering this wasn't going to the moon, just going up to the International Space Station. Now, this little thing right here is where the second stage would connect. So once the first stage had used up all its fuel, it would basically disconnect from the second stage and, again, make its descent back down to the drone ship to be cleaned and possibly reused. Now, one of the things that I want to mention is SpaceX is actually the company whose lander design is going to be used for the Artemis program, which is going to take us back to the moon by the mid-2020s. And so it's really cool because we're still having a partnership with Elon Musk to help design some of the future landers and craft that are going to be taking us to places like the moon and maybe even Mars. And you can actually see the logo for the Falcon 9 right there, too, next to the American flag.
Sorry, Chris. This is a great view. Can you do me a favor and quickly just leave the camera here and jog over right under the fin so we can get a scale to your height? Wow, that is huge, guys. Look how huge that is. That is humongous.
Yeah, it's
Chris,
about...
How tall are you, Chris?
I'm about 6 foot, and the Falcon...
About 180? Okay. Yeah, that's really huge.
So the Falcon is about 13 feet across, or about, I guess, 4 meters, roughly. 4 meters in diameter. Wow. And so it's quite large. And again, most of that is just going to be used for the fuel. So all the cargo would attach after the second stage. Again, that's where the Crew Dragon capsule would go if we were sending up a crew. If we were using a larger payload, like say we were bringing up something like a space telescope or something, we'd use what's called the Falcon Heavy, which would be a slightly bigger version of the Falcon that would actually be used to help carry up other payloads. So again, we use kind of different model Falcons and other rockets for different things. And you can see just how big it is by the number of restraints it's got on it too. They actually had to use a crane to get this thing lifted down, because when this thing is totally fueled, it weighs multiple tons to just lift this thing up. Oh, we actually have some wildlife right here that you can see. I don't know if you can see. We get a couple guests that occasionally come and see our rockets. So because NASA is on a national wildlife preserve, you will occasionally see some deer, or even our little gator that loves to hang out here called MECO, which stands for Main Engine Cutoff. I guess that's what you get when an engineer names your wildlife for you, but still, pretty cool name. Now, unfortunately, that's about all the time I have to talk. Do any of my scientists have questions that I can answer? I think this is a great shot, because you can see again, that's where the Saturn V rocket's going to be across the street, which has got the same pieces that would have been used for Apollos 18, 19, and 20 had the program continued after Apollo 17. So, Ted, are you cool if I take questions here?
Yep, definitely. Does anyone have any questions for our Captain Chris? Anyone? You're welcome to unmute your microphones and just ask Chris or type in the group chat for us.
I'm saying, let me make sure my audio's all up so I can hear all of my scientists and space cadets out there. I think it is, so let me just make sure. Yeah, it can be any questions. It doesn't have to be just about what we talked about today. I actually do our planetarium shows here too, so if you have any space science questions at all, please feel free to ask.
Yep. Dulcie, Thomas, Kelly, Caden, Bonnie, any questions? Anything at all? Oh, Dulcie said no. I have a private one being sent to me, Chris. So,
okay.
Can astronauts make instant cup noodles?
That is a good question. You know, I'm not 100% sure if they can do instant noodles like that. I know there's a lot of different varieties of food they can do. Space food's actually gotten a lot better since the Mercury program. Back then, it basically was toothpaste containers filled with food. So it was things like, oh, yay, toothpaste meatloaf, toothpaste spinach today, woohoo! Well, nowadays, there's pretty much anything that you can think of to eat, there's some version of on board the station. So, for example, macaroni and cheese. I know that's one that astronauts love to eat. They just add the water and they got mac and cheese. They can have drinks like coffee and other kinds of drinks like sports, like certain kinds of like Gatorades and things like that. And I think there are some noodles, like things that would be similar to cup of noodles, but a little different. So again, the big thing with space food is it just needs to be one that's not going to make a lot of crumbs, because you don't want crumbs flying all over the place in microgravity. That's not fun. And it also needs to be something that you can vacuum seal. Now, astronauts do get fresh food from time to time. They actually grow some on the station. And sometimes they'll actually bring up fresh fruit too. So things like oranges and grapefruits and other kinds of fruits and vegetables like that. So I see I got a question in the chat. How long does it take to get to the ISS? How long will it take to get to the moon in the Artemis program? Oh, it's a great question. So it doesn't actually take too long to get to the International Space Station. The longest part is actually the time it takes to dock with the International Space Station, because getting up into low Earth orbit only takes about 8 minutes. But actually getting your craft at the same speed as the International Space Station and docking with it can take multiple hours. So to give you an idea of how fast the ISS is going, it's going 17,500 miles per hour. And I'm trying to think of kilometers per hour in my head. That would be maybe around 25,000 kilometers per hour, give or take, around that. So incredibly fast. And so your shuttlecraft or your spaceship would have to go about that fast to dock with it successfully. So it could take, a good bit of time. Now, to get to the moon, about 3 days, give or take. So with the Apollo program, it took about that long. May take a little less with the Artemis program, but we're expecting it to take about the same amount of time. So that's a great question.
I have a question here from Caden. What is the biggest spaceship so far?
That is a great question. That record was just broken. Used to be what was behind me right here. It's about 363 feet in length, or about 121 meters. Recently, that was broken by Elon Musk's Starship, which is the rocket that he's planning on actually using for missions to Mars. Now, the Starship is about 390 feet long, or about 130 meters. And so it's incredibly large. And it basically looks kind of like the classic science fiction rocket that I'm sure you all have seen. Like, it looks like the silver tin can. It looks really nice, though. And so I don't have a picture of it to show you, but I highly recommend you look up a picture of the Starship. The first one was finished being built as of a couple of days ago. It's pretty amazing. So it's, again, going to be used for returning to the moon and even to Mars in the future, because Elon wants to get to Mars as early as 2026. Only 5 years from now. So who knows? We might have people walking on the moon in only 5 years from now. Or on Mars in 5 years from now. That'd be pretty awesome. So unfortunately, I think that's all the time I have for questions with y'all. But I want to say thank you so much for all of you. You guys were awesome. You had so much enthusiasm. And I hope this was a great end to y'all's time being space cadets. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Ted.
Thank you, Chris. Everyone, let's take a quick group photo with Captain Chris. Please turn on your webcams, all the students.
The Falcon?
Yep. Yes, please. Thanks. Everyone, let's go ahead and turn your cameras.
Let me turn it around
this way. You're still laying in bed. That's fine. Turn your cameras so that we don't have a black spot in our group photo. Thank you. Okay, Cadence, you disappeared again. Hi, Bonnie. Kiki. Dulcie. All right, we'll have Kaden back. All right, ready? Bonnie, make sure your face is in frame, yeah? Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Yay. All right, let's do one more silly face. Ready? Do a silly face. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause. Unmute your microphones and give a round of applause to Captain Chris for the amazing tour this morning. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. Hope you had a lot of fun.
Thanks. All right, to all the students, thank you for participating this morning, and we'll see you.
Thank y'all so much.
Day.
I hope you had a lot of fun. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Chris. Bye, all the students. Have a good weekend.
Bye.